This is very thrilling to see such a full house. I don't think I've ever seen the theater this full, and I've been here many times. So it's wonderful that you showed up, that you have this interest in tonight's topic and in this important Vancouver neighborhood, which even though the last census, I think, pegged its population at 20,000, it has this giant place in Vancouver. This is an important conversation we're having tonight, one of literally hundreds, I'm sure, that have taken place about the downtown east side and in the downtown east side over the decades as people inside and outside the community have talked about what to do. This is coming at a difficult time. I talked to a number of people before this evening started who said, oh man, you are in such trouble. Like, this is not an easy time to have this conversation. He reminded me of something that I think many of us know, but it's a really hard time right now in the downtown east side. There's a lot of people who live and work there who are feeling huge pain. They're coping with increasingly dire situations about homelessness, housing insecurity, increasing gang activity and violence, and at the same time, people around them are dying of poison drugs. The downtown east side has not ever been an easy place, but I think, people would agree that it's really tough right now. So this debate is not an academic conversation in any way for those people, even though it might be for some of us. This is their lives. So given that, I know that there'll be some strong emotions tonight, and I hope we can all listen and take in what people are saying without our lizard brains going into action. We'll see. So the debate tonight is essentially about whether the Downtown East Side Plan of 2014 needs to be changed, rethought. And by the way, I think some of you probably thought there's a nefarious timing to this debate, that it's happened because the new ABC Council has been elected and they've got something planned. The province just came out with its plan for the Downtown East Side earlier this week. But I'll tell you that they started planning this January of last year, and there's about 300 emails to prove that. So it's been a topic that's been of interest long before any political changes. I just wanted to start with a little bit about the plan and about the Downtown East Side and about me, because it's important that we understand where we come from in relation to this neighborhood. So I grew up in Vancouver, in North Van, a suburban girl, but the Downtown East Side was a place that was important to me, not just because my mom made us shop at Army and Navy. The Bay was too rich for our blood. I had friends who worked at Woodward's. We went to the Pantages Theater for midnight showings. I did go to the Drake Hotel in its day. And also, my father lived in the Downtown East Side for many, many years in an SRO hotel there and died there. So my connection is very intimate. I still live not far away. I drive through every day, almost every day. And it is a neighborhood that, as I said earlier, is outsized in what it means to Vancouver. And in my reporting time, which has been, as Bryce said, almost 30 years, it's always been a neighborhood that's been subject to dramatic changes, not always of its own choosing. So, there were changes in the city policies that meant that people couldn't sell drugs in the bars anymore the way they used to, which was kind of a safe place, actually, and they all ended up out on the street. And there were influxes of new drugs, like crack, that really changed sort of the sidewalk scene quite noticeably in the 90s. And then there was Expo 86, which kicked off a wave of fears about gentrification and some real loss of housing at the time. The 2010 Olympics prompted a lot of concerns again, but it also prompted the Liberal government of the time to buy 25 hotels in the area in about 2007 as they knew the world was coming. And of course, today there's concerns about the toxic drug crisis, more worries about gentrification, and pushing people out of the, what little affordable housing is left, and really big spikes in homelessness, and a kind of homelessness that we haven't seen before in Vancouver. People in much worse conditions, living in much more terrible public places. Throughout my time reporting in the downtown east side, what always impressed me were the incredible networks of support and connection in this community, as well as the resilience and kindness of many people in it. And I've gone to a lot of American cities, to their slums, as they would call them. You don't realize how connected and how supportive the downtown east side community is until you compare them to that. So this community participated energetically in the public conversations that led up to the current downtown east side plan that was adopted in March 2014. They've also participated in various updates, including a recent one in 2020. So I think some people are worried that this debate is really, in spite of the wording, about one thing, which is how can we get condos built at Main and Hastings from the developers. I know that that's what some people are thinking. And for sure, the plan, which is multifaceted, the most controversial part, or the part that ended up being the most discussed, was that in the DEOD, which is one part of, the entire downtown east side, that only social housing and rental housing in a 60-40 split would be allowed. So no condos, obviously. But I just want to remind people that the plan was about more than land use. It was about the social and physical health of people in the neighborhood, and about economic vitality, and about access to low barrier employment, and about parks and open space, and a lot of other things. But yes, housing is a central issue. And people the entire time I've been covering the downtown east side, there's been a concern that this last pocket, after poor people were squeezed out of every other part of Vancouver, that this last pocket will end up being taken over for housing for not even necessarily rich people, just people who are slightly higher, a couple rungs up. But that's a disaster for the people who are, further down on that housing ladder. So housing is a central issue. I asked the city staff to give me just a little update, just to frame this before we get started with some actual facts. And they sent me back like 13 pages of very dense stuff. So I just am going to extract a little bit. So just on the housing front, there have been 250 condos approved, but only 100 built since 2014. There have been 1,062 market rentals approved, 425 built, and 210 under construction. There have been 2,817 social housing units approved, 1,200 built, 824 under construction, but almost 800 not yet built, and what I'm hearing from many people is some of those are on pause because they can't figure out how to make them work financially. And the area has lost 20% of its businesses in that time, 516 businesses. And finally, the city said it looked like about 16 million in grants that were given out to support arts and culture, some street cleaning. I don't believe that includes the Van Du contract, but I could be wrong, and environmental and economic initiatives. I don't think anyone would argue that the city has, that area, that the downtown east side has seen a huge improvement in spite of those efforts. As we know, whole hotels have been lost. People have been dying in hotel fires and street incidents, and the misery index is really high there. So that's the picture that we're looking at as our debaters talk about, does the plan need to be changed? Okay, so you're going to vote before you hear one word of the debate, then quickly tabulate the results and show them to you. Then the debaters, 2 for each side, 2 pro, 2 con, will try to change your minds and even try to change their debater colleagues' minds. Good luck. And they'll each have 6 minutes to make an opening statement. Then I will moderate an exchange period among the 4 of them. And then there's 2 intervener groups, sort of. One of Downtown Eastside residents over here, and then Wally Wargala from the Gastown BIA, which is a business association that works pretty closely with people in the Downtown Eastside and does a lot more than just business promotion, as I've discovered over the years. Oh, I'm sorry. And Roger Collins, where are you? From Calabash, right? Also on the intervener side. So, and then following those audience questions, so they talk amongst themselves, we hear from the interveners, you get to ask some questions. When all of that is completed, each debater will give a closing statement of 2 minutes, and then you vote again. And we see if anyone changed their mind. Whoever changes the most minds in one direction or another is the winner. It's odd to think of winners in an issue like that, but anyway. So let's get going. And what we're going to get you to do is, before the debate starts, you cast your vote right now. Does the Downtown Eastside plan need to be rethought? But where's the music? Do, 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 do. Oh, thank you. Okay, I have the results of the first round, and I'm sorry we didn't tell you this before, but the doors are locked and you have to stay for the second round no matter what. Anyway, so pro is 85% and con is 15%. Although there can be very many different reasons behind both of those. So don't forget, we're going to poll you again at the end of the debate. And now let's meet the teams who I think are going to be brought in on a chariot with golden horses, or where are they? Okay, so let's welcome our debaters tonight. And our first ones up are the pro team, Michael Geller and Suzanne Anton. And I know everyone on this panel really well. This is kind of fun for me, but Michael is a longtime planner, architect, prolific Twitter person, loves to get into debates, arguments on Twitter, and is very resilient for some reason about it all. He first became involved in the Downtown Eastside in the 1970s as CMHC's architect planner, that's Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation for those who aren't in the nerd group, and a program manager for social housing. And in 2004, he participated in the Woodwards redevelopment on behalf of SFU, and in 2008 was a founding director of Building Community Society, which was a volunteer group looking at how to help the Downtown Eastside. And he has been a pretty strong opponent of the Downtown Eastside plan from day one and even before. So Michael, where are you? Oh, do the other one? Okay, sorry. Don't applaud, stop. Okay, and next, along with him is Suzanne Anton, who, these biographies are so, not what I was expecting, because there's so much more. Suzanne's a great cyclist, has cycled all across Canada, but she was also the Attorney General and Minister of Justice of BC and MLA for Vancouver-Fraserview, 2013 to 2017. I got to know her when she was on Vancouver City Council for 6 years, 2005 to 2011, although she did start on the Park Board and continues to have a passionate interest in that. And Suzanne is a lawyer and former Crown prosecutor and math teacher. So that's the pro side. Okay, now you can applaud. Okay, and now arguing the con side. Got a job to do, it looks like. So Tanya Fader is the first person I'll introduce, and Tanya has worked in the downtown east side for 23 years in supportive housing, harm reduction, mental health, and addictions. Started on the front line. She's now the director of housing for PHS Community Services Society. For those of you who don't know, it's one of like the big 5 nonprofits providing social housing in the downtown east side and elsewhere. You know, they have branched out. So Tanya has just a wealth of experience in the downtown east side. She's a go-to for me to explain how things work. Along with her is Nathan Edelson, who I think I met in my first few months of covering City Hall in 1994, and he has been a voice in the city that people have listened to for many years. He's now has a private consulting firm, 42nd Street, where he helps out with the planning project in Falls Creek South, but he was the downtown east side senior city planner for many years, where he worked on all of the policies related to housing, heritage, community, economic development, social services, and harm reduction. And he has a better sense of humor than me. So I hope you get to hear some of that. So can we have our con team come up? Cartwheeling. So we get the 6-minute opening statements here. We're really keeping it to 6, Michael. Really keeping it to 6. And we're going to start, there's a certain order that Urbanarium always does things in, 1 pro, 1 con, same order at the beginning and at the end. So we're going to start with Michael arguing for the resolution.
It's wonderful to see so many friends. I also want to thank Frances for her opening remarks, and I want you to know that I'm already a winner because I told Patrick Condon it would be around 80-20. He thought it'd be 50-50. So don't support my colleagues over here. Like Frances, I too want to share a little bit about my background. I started with CMHC at a time when people started to realize large-scale public housing projects with a concentration of low-income people are not the way to create community. At the time, Vancouver was starting a major new development on the south shore of Falls Creek. Interestingly, a lot of people were absolutely convinced it was the wrong thing to do. They thought it was wrong to mix low income and high income. They thought it was wrong to have families there. A city planner even resigned. But I didn't work on that. I was working in the downtown east side on a number of projects, including Antoinette Lodge, which some of you may know. I'm most proud of that one. I also helped the City of Vancouver build its very first project under its housing corporation, and it has subsequently been demolished. But I was eventually appointed as the special coordinator for Falls Creek because everyone in my office at CMHC was convinced it would be a failure. And as many of you know, it wasn't a failure. Although at the beginning, many people questioned it. And I have to point out that those wonderful co-ops, the Falls Creek Co-op, were designed by my dear friend Richard Henricus, and Roger Hughes are in the audience, and that was a long time ago. And in the subsequent years, Nathan and I have had, you should be watching this, Nathan, it's you up there, because you learned something, you know? Nathan and I have had many conversations about not only Falls Creek, but the planning of the city. But I thought it was interesting, the Montreal Gazette's comment. And since then, I've worked on a number of major projects in Vancouver where the city requires a mix of housing. And yes, Francis, I am here tonight to try and convince people that indeed we should be building condos at Main and Hastings. Just as at SFU, we tried to create a broad range of housing, rental, ownership, rich, poor. Similarly at Woodward's, where I worked for almost a decade for the developer, for the province, and eventually with SFU. Many people have argued there should not be more Woodwards. I think there should be more projects like Woodwards. I think they are a success. As Francis mentioned, I worked with some very impressive people with the community, building community society. But I left that to run for city council because I actually believed that I might be able to make a change, make a difference. And I have to read this. I want to be on council when the tide changes in terms of things starting to get better. That was in 2008. But the one thing that I'm glad I did do was during the campaign announce the concept of modular housing for the homeless. It had been my university thesis in 1971, and I must tell you I'm very pleased that that idea has eventually gained currency. Following that experience, I involved in a number of debates, including this one that I found online with David Eby, and I wish I had time to tell you our respective positions, but Eby was right. That brings me to the plan. The plan is fine. There are many things about it that are good and should continue, but there are two things that I do want to see changed. One is I do want to see ownership housing brought into the community. And the other thing is I want to see approval for a broader range of retail uses. As Francis said, condos are permitted in Strathcona, but not in the DEOD. Ironically, I spent a lot of time back in 2014 talking to people as to what changes I wanted to see in this plan, primarily to fill up these storefronts that were vacant then, and sadly, so many are vacant today. And I went to council and I did argue, please allow a broader mix of housing. We do it everywhere else in the city. Let's do it here. But indeed, there was a very strong contingent that said no condos in the downtown east side. Since then, I've written quite a bit as a Courier columnist, and I wanted to share with you a few final images. The plans showed this image for Dawes and Hastings. This is what it is today. I think we want it to look like the image. Hastings and Maine, we want to see that changed. I want to see these storefronts filled up. None of us want to see this continue. And I think by having a broader mix of housing, we can begin to create a healthier community with buying power to support more shops, more services. So yes, let's make some adjustments to this plan. And in a few minutes, I'm delighted to introduce to you my colleague, who's disappeared from the slide screen. I had all these lovely pictures. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, because I can't stop being a reporter, they did change what retail is allowed last year. Okay. So, for the con side, Tanya.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. We do not need to rethink the Downtown East Side plan. Sorry, I forgot about my slides. There we go. A lot of thought, research, and consultation went into the creation of the Downtown East Side plan, from low-income community members to Indigenous and social service organizations to all of the impacted business improvement associations. These decisions were not made in a void or with any particular group overrepresented. Let's recognize that this plan is not just referring to what is typically thought of as the Downtown East Side. It is essential for the futures of Chinatown, Gastown, Strathcona, and beyond, for Vancouver as a whole. Following the years of the latest overdose crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, extreme weather events, and shifts in local and global economies, we need to move forward with the plan more urgently than ever. We must achieve the preservation of existing housing stock via renovation, as well as the construction of new, purpose-built, self-contained housing. The increase in extreme climate events further emphasizes the need for solutions to homelessness, housing with proper ventilation, heating and cooling systems, and increased fire safety. Things we all need, and things we all need to prioritize. This is what needs a rethink. Supportive housing in Vancouver had no choice but to start in SROs, but this isn't where we should stay. Modular housing has truly been a game changer in Vancouver, self-contained with bathrooms and kitchen space, dignified housing across neighborhoods that has improved hundreds of lives and been a benefit to the communities they're in. We all do better when people aren't homeless in our neighborhoods, our shared spaces, our parks, in front of businesses and storefronts. Even if you can't find empathy for those at risk of homelessness, which you should, surely you can see the benefit of people being housed. When people are appropriately housed, they are not living on sidewalks or parks. They are not having to urinate and defecate in public. They are not having to consume their substances in public. Let's be honest. Normative society doesn't like to see poor people, addicted people, mentally ill people, homeless people. The best way to remove this discomfort, these fraught intersections of space and interaction, is to house people. The major issue with the Downtown East Side plan is that it hasn't been fully implemented. So we have yet to see the ultimate results. We also desperately need to move the city forward in hope, healing, and yes, prosperity. Take Crab Park for an example. It was meant to be in the plan, supported as a cultural hub, a protective green space, the only waterfront park for people in the Downtown East Side. Instead, we have seen an increase of encroachment by industry here. We don't need to rethink the Downtown East Side plan. We need to actualize it and fulfill its intentions before it's too late. If this plan is scrapped, we run the risk of losing all housing stock preservation and creation in the parts of the city that need it the most. And make no mistake, every neighborhood in the city, the Lower Mainland and the province, are in desperate need of a full range of housing options. And it needs to be implemented with a common good at the heart of it, not dominated by real estate developers. And don't get me wrong, developers have a place at the table too and need to partner in forging ahead together. Architects and urban planners and artists are all essential to design of livable and sustainable communities in Vancouver. But trust me, the developers will be okay. They'll be okay. As Francis mentioned, there's many reasons why many people, the poor people, push to the Downtown East Side, the last remaining neighborhood in Vancouver that people could afford shelter, rent, housing. And it still is the last place, and even that is disappearing even as we speak now, as private landlords buy up SRO housing stock and gentrify it. Francis mentioned Expo 86, all that stuff. And we also need to consider that Indigenous people in our populations make up about 4%, and yet they are vastly overrepresented, making up more than 40% of people living in poverty in our city, particularly in the Downtown East Side. The Downtown East Side was a neighborhood nobody else wanted until they did. We have a responsibility to protect the housing and the services provided for the people that were originally there. We cannot move towards reconciliation until we achieve this, until the plan is complete. When we opened Insight 20 years ago, I was part of that action in getting it open, keeping it open. Amidst the ongoing heroin overdose and HIV/AIDS crisis, even those of us fighting to get it open couldn't have predicted the reach of its necessity. From the first day we opened the doors, we saw people come through who were not just those who we were prepared for. We also welcomed people who lived in big houses in Dunbar and Shaughnessy. I know, I recognize some of them from high school and university. We had guys in business suits needing their unfortunately illicit medicine in the middle of their workday. We had people taking the SkyTrain in from Surrey because no other harm reduction services whatsoever there available for them. So yes, the Downtown East Side did become a hub of low-income housing and services, but it was also originally such as that. So yes, the Downtown East Side has carried the burden of other municipalities and regions failing to provide the housing, and they need to take responsibility too. But in the meantime, we are citizens of this city, as are all of the people in the Downtown East Side, traditional and beyond, and we have a duty to protect them and to provide what is needed for them to thrive, because when we do well, when we all do well, we all do well. Thank you.
And now from the pro side, Suzanne Anton.
Okay, I didn't practice this. There we are. Thank you very much, and what a pleasure it is to be here tonight. And to talk about the Downtown East Side plan and whether or not it should be changed or whether it's working. And of course, I do think that there are some changes that can be made. But I will start off by saying it is a beautiful plan. It is very aspirational. It has its conclusions are the right ones, which are livable neighborhoods, housing for people who live there. But it has been there and who need housing, but it has been swamped by events. It's been swamped by the demographics of our country, with 1 million people coming here last year. And it's been swamped, of course, by the drug crisis and the mental health crises. We're only talking about housing today. I hope Urbanarium does more debates on the other issues in that neighborhood, because I think debates are fantastic and it's useful to talk about issues, and which is why I really do thank the Urbanarium for organizing us here today. The challenges are great, of course. The safety of women. Atira has done a study recently that says women living there on the street have all been physically assaulted or sexually assaulted. There's fires. There's very poor conditions in many of the buildings. There's decreased life expectancy, and of course, people living on the street in the tents and in Crab Park. It boils down to a number of issues, but the main issue I see is that there just simply isn't enough housing. There isn't enough housing in the Downtown East Side. There's not enough housing in Vancouver. There is not enough housing even in the Lower Mainland. So what are the solutions? I see them coming under 3 headings: policy, planning, and politics. And the policy, and it includes market solutions and non-market solutions. And it involves the community. Of course, the community has been highly involved in this plan, continues to be highly involved. I'm very impressed, actually, with the implementation plans and the work that goes into them. There's always a balance for City Council. I'm glad councillors are here. There's always a balance for council between the needs of the city and the needs of the community, and that's something that has always been true and will always be true. So, in terms of policy, I do think that there are changes that could be made. I would suggest that the single-room accommodation bylaw have increased flexibility, and there needs to be a plan to phase it out over time. Private landlords, the SRA bylaw requires private landlords to provide a public function, namely social housing. And over time, that simply doesn't work. It was put in place 20 years ago. It's been increased now to $230,000 a room if those rooms are changed. It's quite punitive. And I think it's something that really needs a proper analysis, a financial analysis and a purpose analysis. Is it actually doing what it should do? The second zoning review I would recommend is the one that has been mentioned, the 60-40, 60% social and 40% secured market housing in the Downtown East Side Oppenheimer district. Again, that is all social housing in that neighborhood. And I agree completely with Michael's proposal that that is not a good mix, that it is good for a healthy community to have a mix of housing. It will always be a low-density neighborhood, a low-income neighborhood. And by the way, I am not suggesting in any of this that anyone who's there should be displaced. I am suggesting the housing supply needs to be increased. There's also a public benefits piece, but I will leave that because I'm going to run out of time on this. There's not just the Downtown East Side plan that needs to be changed, though. It's the city itself needs to be open to changes. Now, some of these are happening. The social and supported housing has to be built throughout the city. That has always been the case, but if you look at the numbers, they still don't match up. There's so much more social housing in the Downtown East Side than there is around Vancouver. It really needs to have a concerted effort to make sure that it's built everywhere in the city. The city, through the market, can supply housing, but there needs to be vastly increased density in the city because there are so many people coming here. And if the people come here, who gets squeezed out? The people with the least means to find housing. And of course, they get squeezed out on the Downtown East Side, and there are people living on the streets, and nobody wants to see them living on the streets like that. Another piece that could be changed, my friend Sam Sullivan is here at the top. Sam has done a lot of investigation into rooming houses. Vancouver used to be full of rooming houses. People had inexpensive housing throughout the city. They all got closed down during the 70s and 80s, except in one area, and that's the Downtown Peninsula and the Downtown East Side. This building here, this social housing, 1925 Southeast Marine. I see councillors here. I hope that you will invite those providers to go put another 10 stories on that building. It's on a major route. It's got nice views of the Fraser River. Put some market housing on top of it. It's that kind of density which is needed around the city. Planning processes, we all know how slow they are. Councils and mayors over the years have said we've got to get rid of them. That onion has to be unpeeled. It's too slow, too unwieldy, too hard to get your projects through, too hard to get social housing projects through, too hard to get market housing projects through. Politics, Philip Owen, Vancouver Agreement, getting all the governments in the room, extremely valuable. It ran out. Next, politics, the real kick on housing, moving housing forward was Sam Sullivan, 2005 to 2008. 14 city-owned sites turned over for housing, and the province, remember that? A numbered company was buying buildings in the downtown east side. Of course, that turned out to be Rich Coleman. I feel very optimistic. I'm done, but the new mayor has good relationships with the premier. He's clearly got a good relationship with the federal government. The federal government is MIA. Let's get them at the table and with some authority to build housing. And I do feel very optimistic moving forward because I think there's a lot of people that are pulling in the right direction here. So there's some specific changes and some optimism. Thank you very much.
That was a sneaky 25 seconds over, but okay. And closing off, Nathan Edelson for the con side.
Thank you very much for being here tonight. I think what you're going to find is that it's not so much a debate as a lot of agreement and a few points that there is significant disagreement about. But they're not fatal. It's figuring out how to work together. I'll repeat a few of the things that have been said just to reinforce them. The downtown east side has been home to many of Vancouver's poor. Everybody knows that. 60% of its residents have incomes below $20,000. Think of yourself living on that. 3,000 live in SROs, almost all without private bathrooms or kitchens. Again, think of that. More than half the city's 2,100 homeless live in the downtown east side. More than 250 local residents passed away due to toxic drug overdoses just last year. Your friends and neighbors dying because of a terrible introduction of people feeling so desperate that they're using illegal drugs that they know are dangerous, that they know are killing their friends, and they still die now. Since it was approved in 2014, the Downtown Eastside Land Use Plan has encouraged more market housing. Over 1,000 units of market rental and 250 ownership units have been approved. Not all of them have been built yet, but there is market housing coming into the community and in other parts of the inner city. The Downtown Eastside is not just the DEOD. The focus tonight is on the DEOD. Land values are also rising considerably, even in the downtown east side, because of this market housing. Private ownership was once a way to ensure many of us could have a home. Now, much development has become a source of profit that has driven up the price of land and housing beyond what many of us can afford. And you have to, for the students here and young people trying to start families, you need to give this some thought, partly for yourselves, partly for your children and your grandchildren. If the business community convinces council to allow even more market housing in the inner city, there'll be even more pressure on housing for low and moderate income residents. The result will be more homeless people on the streets and more workers commuting long distances to their jobs. That's just true. And I think we need to think about what this really means and where do we start a plan? Do we start a plan by putting in jeopardy the people who are most vulnerable, or do we take care of them and then consider other options? The senior governments need to fund more social housing and to raise the social allowance from, if you can believe this, $375 a month, where rents, even for a small studio apartment, can average around $1,800 a month and more. Most of the people living on the street or in shelters in the downtown east side are from Vancouver. There are children, there are friends and neighbors, there are people we've gone to school with. And then others are from other municipalities in the region. Everywhere rents are rising and rent evictions make way for even higher priced housing. If business leaders want to improve, and I'll look at Michael as a business leader, because I think he does have a lot of leadership and has done some incredible work for government and in the private sector. But if business leaders want to improve conditions in the downtown east side, they need to find common solutions with the community organizations and the 3 levels of government, including other municipalities. As Michael and Suzanne may recall, when I was the senior planner for the downtown east side many years ago, the government's committed to working on the top priorities of each of the major interest groups. Low-income community leaders asked for social housing and a bylaw to protect the SROs. That doesn't mean it should be entrenched, that it can't change over time, but that was a hard fight. A supervised injection site and other innovative health facilities, redevelopment of Woodwards, opportunities for employment and community arts. Gastown is one example of a more market community under John Stavel's leadership, and I hope, John, we have a chance to talk to John at another time. First, major new heritage incentives, revitalization of Water Street, and more market housing. We delivered on all those. There was considerable community support and relatively little opposition to most of these initiatives. As implementation got underway, low-income and business groups also worked together on the revitalization of Victory Square Park. It was a major change in that park as an inclusive place. The redevelopment of Woodwards. Again, it wasn't that everybody agreed with everything in Woodwards, but nobody can deny that it was inclusive and that it even contained Simon Fraser University, thanks to the hard work of some of the people in this room. The city's first downtown greenway, which is still underway to link False Creek and the Burrard Inlet as the first pedestrian and bike-oriented greenway in the downtown. The Gastown BIA even hired low-income residents trained by United We Can to help keep Water Street clean. Changes in all 3 levels of government resulted in the termination of the Vancouver Agreement, which had been intended to expand to other parts of the city and province. I suggest we go back to the future in the downtown east side and beyond. I have 3 recommendations, and I'll be brief. First, the 3 levels of government should work in cooperation with community leaders from a diversity of interests to increase affordable housing and access to health services for those addicted to drugs. Second, in keeping with Indigenous principles, residents receiving housing and health supports should be recognized for their skills by being given opportunities to help with such things as street cleaning, housing management, as well as food, community arts, and other services. And finally, third, the Center for Excellence in the Practice of Harm Reduction and Healing should be created where staff can be recruited and trained to work in social housing and health services. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'm hoping that you have some questions for each other, but if not, I have a few.
Well, I do.
Okay, but can I ask you one first?
Yes, absolutely.
So, well, people can hear me from here.
Well, I think you should use it because they're taping it, apparently.
Oh, no, but I'll speak into this one.
Okay.
So I've talked to a number of people who, maybe they're not that crazy about the downtown east side plan, but they say that what it did was it preserved low land values so that social housing could get built. If that plan hadn't come in, you wouldn't see the 2,500 units that are going up because the land values would have skyrocketed. That's my question for Michael.
The reason why condominiums were banned in the DEOD is because there was a desire to keep land values low. And I will agree that land values have been kept low, but now I invite you to consider the unintended consequences. And if you're not sure what the unintended consequences are, it's the fact that the situation, unfortunately, today is worse than it was in 2014. And I respect Tanya's point, well, this is a work in progress. Unfortunately, the reality is we've had 100 condominiums in 9 years. That's about 11 units a year. There's more empty storefronts today than there were in 2014. There are more people on the streets than there were in 2014. So my point is, yes, it may have kept the land values low, but we've created an unfortunate situation where I don't think anybody has really benefited.
Does anyone want to take that one on?
Yeah, sure. I think we can all agree that the way things currently are is not ideal for anybody. And like you say, a lot of things have changed. But do we just do the thing where let's form another committee and start all over again? We're not even 10 years into a 30-year plan. And the vision of the Downtown East Side plan still has a long way to go in achieving these things. And yeah, there's a lot of things that have happened in our world that have changed the way that all of our landscapes look. But keeping the property values lower, which I would argue, is you need to just look a bit east to all of the condos right around Main Street in Chinatown. I don't think developers are suffering. I think if you look at the number of condos around that area, they have increased immensely. And in terms of storefronts shutting, how many examples do we have of because of private landlords with retail leases in the bottom knowing about the developments and seeing the developments around Chinatown that they can charge a lot more? It's actually people being priced out business-wise as well. Let's think about Kent's Kitchen. Let's think about Daisy Bakery, right? There are tons of examples of businesses being priced out, not moving from the neighborhood because they no longer want to be in the downtown east side.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll just add one piece, which is that it's important that this housing be built around Vancouver. It's not just the land values in the downtown east side that matter, it's the land values around the city. And Vancouver is an expensive city. It's always going to be an expensive city. And that is just the price of living here and the price for governments of people wanting to come here. But there is maybe less expensive land in South Vancouver. My riding of Vancouver-Fraserview had a lot of pretty low-density co-op developments, which there's room to put buildings there. There's other places housing can go and should go. It does not all have to be concentrated on the downtown east side. And by the way, not everybody always wants to live on the downtown east side. There are people there who would rather live in other places. So I don't think, I agree, going back to Michael's point, that there does need to be a mixture. It does not all have to be social housing in that neighborhood. It should be social housing all around the city of Vancouver. And around the Lower Mainland, by the way. Somebody said that, and I forgot to amplify that. I agree with that completely. It's not just Vancouver that needs to bear this burden of providing housing, which is costly. It has to be provided everywhere that people live.
Thank you. The Downtown East Side plan, by the way, does envision housing being in other parts of the city, and the numbers the city gave me were 7,500 units have been improved in the rest of the city. Built, I don't know. I'm going to give Nathan a chance to answer that. And I'm just reminding you that it's going to be time for audience questions soon, so make sure that you enter your question or upvote or downvote, other people's questions. Nathan, go ahead.
I think you'll find there's a lot of agreement around this table. The question is, where do you begin? Do you begin with the most vulnerable and make them more vulnerable? Or do we look at the huge amount of land in the city that's single family? It's being increased gradually. Council is coming up with interesting ideas. But where do we put our social housing, our housing for people of a mix of incomes? We need to find those places and build that support. There's one other point which I think you should consider. The key to what I'm talking about are the business and the market communities working together with the low-income communities. If we approve a significant change and leave the most vulnerable people even more vulnerable, that simply will not happen. The debate will simply get deeper, and there'll be less light and more noise associated with it. I think we have to give that serious thought as to where do we begin. What we want is a city with more of a mix, maybe even on Deering Island, who knows, that follows the principles.
That's where Michael lives, for those not in on the joke.
But that mix of incomes we know can work. Michael also helped develop False Creek South. It works brilliantly there. But we don't start by putting in danger the people who are the most vulnerable, the most subject to death and drug use. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 2 minutes left. I hardly think we can do this in 2 minutes, but I'm going to throw it out anyway. I thought that there would be more people saying, given the toxic death crisis, toxic drug crisis, and what that's doing, that the plan needs to be changed to address that in some way. I mean, the city is not, doesn't have control over health, but surely that's something that requires kind of a refresh or a rethink. And maybe Tanya, you could start.
Yeah, so I think, again, we need to be really thinking about revitalization versus gentrification. We need to make sure nonprofits have been left carrying the burden of preserving heritage buildings for the city, of preserving low-income housing stock, and there needs to be more buy-in from everybody. And it does include, it is hard to think about these things in a total one neighborhood piece. There's been over 11,000 British Columbians died from toxic drug poisoning. And so it's clearly not an issue that just exists in the downtown east side, but as Nathan was saying, this is where our most vulnerable people are. And without further protection and preservation of the housing stock and the services that are needed for the people that are already in the neighborhood, we totally agree that there needs to be social and supportive housing across the city. That's part of the reason why the downtown east side is so inundated, and other municipalities in the province and Lower Mainland as well. But clearly a lot more needs to be done, and it's for everyone. I would be hard-pressed to think any of us haven't been affected by an overdose death sitting in this room.
We have a very short time left, but I want to let one person from this side.
I actually want to just echo what Tanya said, because I thought if I only have 2 minutes left to speak, I want to mention this
20
idea.
seconds, but go ahead.
I think if there's one key message, there's a difference between regeneration and gentrification. Gentrification means the gentry come in and the lower income people are forced out. Regeneration means you can create a more vital, vibrant community where the lower income people are allowed to stay. They're not being forced out. And I really believe, having looked at situations around the world, you can achieve that. Unfortunately, in Vancouver, we have not achieved that because we've tried so hard with the best of intents to protect, as Tanya and Nathan say, the lowest, most vulnerable people, but the unintended consequences are too visible on the streets. Thank you.
That was a very forceful answer. Okay, we're going to
add one thing very quickly. The drug policy question is a complicated one. It's certainly not my area. I'm looking at Bryce and Urbanarium. I think that I really do like the debate format, and I think that there are some other very useful debates. So I'll just put that bug in your ear, Bryce, some very useful debates that could be held on some of these other issues.
Okay, thank you. So now next, thanks to the efforts of Amy Nugent at the Urbanarium, we invited some people from the downtown east side to come and speak tonight, and you were already going to come anyway, I believe, so we wanted to give you a place. So I want to welcome Rachel Bigchild, Tyler Bigchild, Donnie Boos, Joanne Campbell, and Amanda McCracken, and I'm not sure which of you is going to speak. And do they need a microphone?
I'm Tyler Bigchild from Rocky Mountain House, Alberta, Sunchild First Nation, and I'm a guest here, and I'm part of the Portland Tenants Union, and we're here to support what's going on. What is really detrimental is how everybody's dismissing the big picture. The youth that are coming here, and there's nowhere to go. There's no housing, there's nowhere for any of the kids to go anymore. And I'm sick and tired of watching these kids die in the streets, watching them die in the rooms by themselves. And you send them out to another community, elsewhere, outside of the city, and where are they gonna go? They're gonna go, they have no support, there's no community support, there's no sense of community. And that's what we're trying to build more.
Thank you.
One of our fellow tenants at the Portland Inn, Joe, had just passed away on Sunday because the users, he uses a heavy power wheelchair and he was forced out of his home. He got taken away from his friends. He had no support from the Portland PHS or anybody. He was alone. And he got sent into the hospital and he passed away alone. And he has friends at the Portland. He has people that can support him, but he didn't get that because we had the elevators down, we didn't have our community. Our community downtown is being broken. And you talk about the low income, that you're already categorizing us into a group. Yeah, we are low income. We do have friends that we lean on every day of our lives. And it's taken away when we can't even get our issues addressed. We get ignored. You won't come and meet with us so we can have a sit down and talk about the issues around us. And it's an everyday thing for us, and we're just asking for you to listen to us, not tear apart our community that we have.
Thank you.
I live in the east side as well. It's very difficult living there. There is a lot of stress and a lot of hardships and a lot of pain and sorrow that people carry coming to that city, that area of the city, and also what they gain while they're there. And it makes for a different kind of people. And I know that not everybody who's had any of the experiences that a lot of the people who have had down there may not be able to relate and see us as more of a type of people. And really, we are all so varied and very different people from each other, even. Not everybody's the same. And some people down there really got their heart into this, that they want to make a difference in the world, not just downtown. And I'd like to see some people from other walks of life actually sort of show that same interest. And yeah, I like the idea of varying, all over the city. We're all on the same rock, sailing through the solar system together. Time to get along.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, John. Recognition of the Portland Tenants Union, we're committed to the regular person meeting with us. Okay. Compassion for the suffering when the elevator is down, and support for when the elevator breaks down again, having plans of fixing it right away. And the part of the people that were promised their homes, or their places when they were moved in this elevator breakdown, that they get their places back. And, yeah. And then where the real struggle is the downtown east side. What for the people who live there, we say Mr. Fader do the right thing, recognize the support of the tenants, and fight for justice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from Wally Wargala and Roger Collins. Your comments or questions, whatever you want.
Sure. Well, thanks for the opportunity. I think I'll echo some of the things that we just heard, because I think part of the business community is also feeling some of that brokenness of our city. There is kind of a lack of supports coming from the city in a lot of ways. A lot of this fold on the business community, a lot of the BIAs, 22 of us in around Vancouver. A lot of us have taken on some of this support, so you see security measures that we take on. About a third of our budget goes to that. We've invested about $50,000 this past year in just keeping the streets clean. We're proud of what we've accomplished in Gastown. When you walk the streets, the vibrancy is there, and there is a real mix. I think if you look at our neighborhood, you'll see well, there's a lot of SROs, a lot of social housing. We have more coming with the 23 West Cordova. The Woodwards also has a good chunk of social housing as well as market housing. So really, I think you can look at Gastown as almost a beacon of a neighborhood that has made it work. We have that real good combination from a retail perspective to a housing perspective, and I think we can be part of that, maybe the part of the solution. We're always reaching out to the community to try and find ways to work together. So I'll just kind of, I'll leave it at that. I think there's something in our neighborhood that could be looked at as maybe a key to the success for the rest of the city.
I just want to open by saying thank you for having me here with all these esteemed guests and all these knowledgeable people here. I just want to share a perspective as a business owner in Gastown, Chinatown, and the downtown east side. And the first thing that comes to my mind when I listen to everybody speak up here is that I really feel the need to share that there's a really strong community down there that people might not see or know about if you're not down there every day. I'm a father of 2 kids, and I can tell you that for the last 13 years that my business has been down there, every single time I bring my kids down to my restaurant or my business, and I take them out the car, the first thing I hear is kids on the block, which means that everybody who's on the streets is aware of what's happening around them at all times. And I know that it looks like a crazy Wild West show when you're walking through there, but if you're there long enough, you'll start to build relationships with people who are on the streets, the people who are selling, the people who are buying, the people who are just trying to survive. They're all people. And I feel like in this city, I think we need to adopt more of a cooperative mindset than a competitive. Because I think that a lot of times the downtown east side is looked down upon and spoken down upon in a certain manner. And I think that we need to look at it as a person or a child that needs help, as opposed to something that we're condoning, or putting down, or like a situation that needs to be resolved. I feel like that whole area needs help. And that's just how I look at it, because I see the suffering and the pain of the residents. I've seen my colleagues have to close their businesses, and people who own families, and people who are just trying to do what they love. And what it comes down to for myself is I feel like there's a little bit of lack of support and a lack of urgency. And just looking at the plan of things that were planned years and years and years ago, yet they're not happening. And it's not about the money, because we all know the city has a lot of money. There's enough money to put on the Olympics. There's enough money to put on chandeliers and huge spiders and all this craziness. Like, it's really ridiculous. You know, I look at where the priorities are, and people are talking about chandeliers and stuff, and I walk to work and I see people suffering, you know, and then people look down on them. And at the end of the day, with that community, there are bridges that can be made. There are Indigenous elders who are respected, who can bridge the gap between the people that you see and the people that need help. And so for myself, I just wanted to come and share that, like, I feel like the direction or the attitude towards the downtown east side needs almost a rebranding or a change, as opposed to something that's a problem as something that we need to work on together, because eventually it's affecting all of us. And you might not think it affects you, but until you have a child that goes down there and gets lost and loses their life, you might not think it's a priority. Until you have a family member, or you have a business, or you have something that you have lost in that world, you might not think it's a priority, but it's like the young lady said, it's an everyday situation. And I just want to leave everybody with the thought of, it sounds corny, but like if everybody can just kind of come together and you know, come up with some kind of solution that will benefit not only the downtown east side, but the ripple effect will affect all of us. And then we'll have a more enjoyable part of the city that we can all enjoy. And I know I might be going a little long here, but one thing I noticed was that before COVID, myself and my colleagues were out there every day when there was people sleeping in front of our storefronts, just asking them to get up and kind of move along, and it was respectful, and people understood that I was trying to do a business and I wasn't trying to put anybody down. But what ended up happening was there was a level of respect. I've never had a glass broken, and I'm at like Carroll and Pender. I'm like right in the heart of it. No one's ever broken anything or damaged my property because of the way we respect what's going on around us. And I think it comes back to community. And I just want to say that like our neighbors and our landlords are PHS, and I've seen a lot of effort, and I know that there's issues that come up everywhere, but I've seen a lot of time and effort and love and energy put into the downtown east side by PHS. I wanted to acknowledge them, and I just wanted to acknowledge everybody here who's here to trying to find a solution. So thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. And it sounded a lot to me like Roger was agreeing with Tanya that there's nothing wrong with the plan. If someone would just actually activate the plan, then maybe it would work better. There's a lot of questions that have come in through Slido, and they're kind of broken into 80% housing questions, 20% why are you white people talking about this? Or maybe less than 20%. So I'm going to start with the housing question. There were a lot of interesting housing questions, but the one that got upvoted the most was, it looks like the existing plan provides for a lot of housing. Why isn't it actually being built? What are the obstacles? If we could do this quickly so we can get through a few, that would be great.
In 2014, I said that this requirement for 60% social housing, 40% rental housing, isn't going to produce the required amount of housing, just simply because the economics don't work. The condos were not being built in the DEOD because they were banned, and the reason only 11 condos a year have been built in the surrounding area is because I think there's a general feeling that people don't want to live in the community as it is. If Kerry Gold was here today, she would be telling you that she's got a story on Friday about an existing condo, the Paris Block, where the residents have voted to try and sell their building because they don't want to live in the community anymore. So I very much respect the remarks that we've heard from you. I know that all of you are respectful towards others, but there's something that somehow there are other people who are not as respectful. And unfortunately, that is why the developers are simply not there.
Okay, if we can stick to housing and not people's language patterns, that would be great. Tanya, do you want to address the question, or Nathan, one of you, about why isn't it getting built?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, as slow as things were before, the pandemic certainly slowed things down again. Everybody's experiencing problems with staffing and global supply chain issues, whether it's for elevator parts or whatever it may be. But also, I do think that the processes that we all have to go through to get projects approved could be improved, and that's across the board for all types of housing. And I think, though, you know, with these 11 condos that keep getting referenced, I don't understand that, because there's, you know, the Downtown East Side plan also covers to Clark Drive, to Thornton Park, there have certainly been a lot of condos built across that area. And I know we tend to think of the downtown east side as this particular really small frame area, which is a beautiful community. If you dare to spend some time down there, you shouldn't have to have a dare. But there are a lot of factors that get in the way, but politics, unfortunately, is a big part of it. And so is the semantics around the embattlement that's created between an us and a them that doesn't need to exist. We can have affordable housing and supportive housing. We can have condos and supportive housing. We can have it all, but the problem is that when there is such a focus on development in terms of what is considered normative, poor people and vulnerable people do get pushed out. So that's what we need to be really, really careful to protect. And it's already happened even with these supposed bans on development. We already see people being further pushed down and pitted against and being, poor people get blamed for everything. And that's what needs to stop. And then maybe we can move forward with proper development.
Thanks. I'm gonna go on to the next question. Okay, we could talk about this a lot, and what I've heard from social housing developers is they can't get anything done right now because the costs are so high, interest, construction, and so on. I'm going to try to frame this question in a slightly different way. What do you think? This was like an initial or a conversation that the Urbanarium decided to come up with. Obviously, this is not city planning. We're not the city planning department. We're not running an official consultation. People have asked why these 4 people, why not, people who live and work down in the downtown east side, although Tanya does work there, and I don't know where you live.
I live there too.
Yeah. So, and others, there were some other questions in the queue about how are you going to, shouldn't there be more diversity and more people from the downtown east side who are talking about this? So my question that I'll pose is, what do you think future debates and conversations about the downtown east side plan should look like? How should, not this, something different? This is one contribution to a particular, kind of group of people who comes to Urbanarium debates, but what kinds of conversations and collaboration and engagement should there be as people consider a new plan? And my sense is that, this city council might be considering that. They were elected on a promise of changing things down there. So go ahead, and maybe I'll start with Nathan and Tanya.
I think the important thing here is to find ways that the low-income community and local residents, and I really appreciate the residents who are here tonight, can work together with the business community and the 3 levels of government. Again, so as we did in the past, starting with the city initiating the connections to the senior governments, and some of that work is already going on, but to really be able to work together and to make this a citywide issue, and then also to be working with other municipalities. We need really good information about where the homeless are coming from, how many are coming into the inner city because there are a few choices, and how do we get the array of services that have been proven successful to be tried in other communities. And I think that's the key to this. If the issue is simply change the DEOD, allow more market housing in, and good luck, I think that opportunity for people to work together will evaporate around that. If the idea is to hold on to the current restrictions, speed up the processes for the kinds of housing that are permitted, but to commit to working together and encouraging the groups to be together. It'll take some time, but the product of that I believe will reveal the solutions that we need, both in the downtown east side, other parts of Vancouver, and throughout the region.
Okay. We just have a short time left, but if one person from your side could talk about, what should the process be if the plan is going to be looked at again.
So Nathan suggested speeding up the processes, which I completely agree with, but I also agree that we need to increase diversity both in the downtown east side and, as I've said before, across the city. I would just like to add one other element in terms of governments, because in terms of the various expertise, that's what I know about. I know about politics and government. The federal government is really missing in action here, and as much as any of you can lobby the federal government, the budget came out today, I couldn't see much in it about housing. There are so many projects ready to go. There are projects stalled, there are projects in the pipeline, as a number of people have mentioned. There are projects, there are buildings that need to be refurbished. Thank you to the team here from the neighborhood. There's goodwill, there's things that can go, but they get stalled. And I think if we could free up the processes at City Hall, I'm glad the city councillors are here, but get the funding from the different levels of government. It is not Vancouver alone that can fund this. It's the province and it's the federal government. And as much as any of us can lobby them, we should all be doing that.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'm sorry there wasn't time for more questions, but you know, this conversation is going to continue. This isn't the end of it. So we're at the closing now. You get 2 minutes to restate your argument or thrust a lance into the balloon of the other side or whatever you want. So Michael, go ahead.
So yes, I do think there should be a broader socioeconomic mix, but there's other things that we definitely need to do. I think we need to look very carefully at why we've allowed the SROs to deteriorate to the point they have, and figure out what can we do to make them more habitable and livable and decent for those people who are living in them. And I say that knowing full well that the real desire is to replace all the SROs with self-contained living units, both in the downtown east side and elsewhere around the city. But I think it's extremely important that the city enforce its maintenance and occupancy bylaws, that we make money available to the owners, both market and non-market operators of these buildings, because the reality is, and we hear it every day, the living conditions in so many of these buildings are virtually intolerable. They're so bad that people are choosing to live on the streets. I've never understood why the city, which comes by my house and worries whether a sprinkler in the garage is insulated, doesn't seem to care enough about the conditions of those buildings. But I do also want to conclude by thanking you for coming today. I wrote an article a couple of years ago called Addressing Homelessness Starts with Hearing Their Stories. And I apologize for using the word there, but you know what I meant. I do think the more we can meet people in the community, and the people in the community can meet those who want to run businesses and build housing and so forth, collectively we can engender a greater level of civic pride. And unfortunately, I just don't feel we've achieved that yet. But like Suzanne and I think the others, I'm optimistic that with David Eby and his commitment to this area, I first met him when I was working down there. The new mayor and council, I think, have demonstrated a commitment. And the federal government, if we can get all three levels of government with money, we can create a much better future and a much better 9 years from now than over the last 9 years.
Thank you. Tanya.
We have a pressing opportunity to shape our city. Our society is one that is caring, safe, vibrant, and accessible, and we need to prioritize and further implement the Downtown East Side plan to achieve this. We are in a crisis. Are you sick of the chaos? Because I know I am. I want to walk on unimpeded sidewalks. I want my family and friends to safely and fully access parks and with their kids and dogs. I want us to all benefit from all types of necessary housing, food security and health services, and shared community spaces. The Downtown East Side plan is a key component in making this happen, and the community piece that was part of the initial consultation needs to be really focused on. Without it, we go back to the drawing board, back to square one when we were already dealing with decades of inaction, neglect, and flawed priorities, and we were all suffering for it. If we further delay what needs to be done, we do so at our own peril. So let's not fall for the us versus them. Let's not get tricked into thinking one group is to blame as the source of everything currently going wrong for Vancouver. It doesn't need to be condos versus supportive housing. We can and should have it all, and the developers will be okay. They will. We have examples of successful mixed-use developments in Vancouver, which has been mentioned on both sides of the table here. We can learn from other cities and countries with more progressive history in building healthy urban environments, but it all starts with housing. Nothing else can be properly achieved until everyone in our city is given the basic human right of housing, not to mention healthcare, green space, art, culture, and human connection. We need to move forward with the Downtown Eastside Plan. We need to learn from it once fully implemented, not get rid of it before its purpose is complete. Then let's learn what needs to be added and built upon, not subtracted from. I think we can all agree that we need more housing, not less. And we can only be a world-class city welcoming to tourists and events and future development and maintain space for everyone in our city when we've truly built a future for all of us, not just the fortunate few. Thank you.
Thank you.
1 million people came to Canada last year in 2022. You can expect a lot of those are coming right here to the Lower Mainland. We need housing. We need a lot of housing. And it is the case, and I understand the fear that because of the pressure on housing, the people at the lowest end of the income spectrum are the ones who get pushed out. There is so much goodwill that should not happen. There are so many people rowing in the same direction to make sure that the projects are built and delivered, and that people can move out of the rooms that are so difficult to room in. I can't imagine going into a room 10 by 10 with nothing in it and a window that barely opens. It's not good housing. And there are people, there are community organizations, the city and the province in particular, are very strongly keen to make those changes. It's not incompatible, I would like to add, though, with what Michael was saying in terms of having a mixed community in the Downtown East Side. The whole community would be healthier if there were businesses there and mixed incomes there. That is not incompatible. That should not push out low-income residents. We need that housing around Vancouver. There is a sense of urgency, and I do feel optimistic, but it's a lot of work to make it happen. So thank you very much for being here tonight.
Nathan, please.
I think the issue is, where do we start? If we go with an arbitrary change to the bylaw to take out one section that's protecting a huge increase in land values and requiring high-rise development in part of our historic precinct and part of what all of Vancouver is about, if we start there, we won't be able to build the coalitions. I promise that the replacement housing will not be there in time if you allow for the buying up of land and the increases in both the private stock of buildings and then the impossibility of nonprofit groups that have provided excellent housing under very challenging circumstances to continue to do their job. We'll also eliminate the possibility of a real coalition of people working, starting in the inner city, but then working in other parts of Vancouver and other municipalities in this region and province, as was originally envisioned through the Vancouver Agreement, to work together to end homelessness in our province and to provide the kind of opportunities that each of us wants for our family, our children, and our grandchildren. And thank you very much for your attention tonight. The single issue here is about the timing of changing that plan. I promise if it's changed right away before the other things are put in place, we'll see a dramatic increase in insecurity and all the concerns in the inner city. If we phase things in a way that people can see that the new housing is coming, that the policies are in place and are seriously funded because we're all working together, we'll have a plan that works. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd really like to thank the four speakers. You know, a lot of people were asked to speak and turned this glorious opportunity down because it just seemed too fraught to them. It's so difficult to have a conversation. So I very much appreciate our speakers for being willing to wade in. and I also want to thank everyone who came down here and listened and who told their stories. Vote results are coming in.
So this is vote 1, this is the vote 2.
Oh my goodness! We have some amazing winners here. Vote number 2, pro 45, con 55. Oh, I know what happened. You guys were just smoking them with that first vote, weren't you? You were lulling them. Oh, very interesting strategy out there. Anyway, that was amazing. I don't think I've ever seen such a big shift. No. Anyway, okay. So that is amazing. And so now Bryce and Rebecca are going to present everyone with a City Debate Award. And, yes, awards to the winning team. See, they get a building and these people get a t-shirt. That's the difference between winning and losing.